Most people think Enemy Mine flopped because it was too weird or ahead of its time. The truth is darker. The movie was filmed twice.
In that respect, it was not so hard to do.
Not hard to do, really? The first version was completely scrapped after millions of dollars burned. The studio was so terrified of the male pregnancy subplot that they lied to audiences about what kind of movie they were selling. And one actor tortured himself so badly creating an alien voice that it nearly destroyed his vocal cords. Today, we're exposing 15 hidden truths behind Enemy Mine, including why the budget exploded to $40 million and how a child actor from this film became one of the most prolific voice actors in Hollywood. Let's get into it. 1. The movie was filmed twice. Enemy Mine didn't just have production problems, it had a complete production apocalypse. The film originally started shooting in 1984 with director Richard Loncraine, best known for The Missionary, a small British comedy. He took cast and crew to remote locations in Iceland and Budapest and spent weeks filming what he thought was a gritty, grounded science fiction drama. When the studio executives saw the footage, they were horrified. They described it as people running around in the dark, too bleak, too ugly, too incomprehensible. So they made a brutal decision: fire Loncraine, scrap every frame of footage, and start over from scratch with a completely different director. They brought in Wolfgang Petersen, the German filmmaker who'd made Das Boot, and told him to rebuild the movie from the ground up. It was a catastrophic reset that doomed the film before it ever reached theaters. 2. The budget exploded. Because 20th Century Fox essentially made two separate versions of Enemy Mine, the budget exploded into the stratosphere. The original modest budget was around $17 million, reasonable for a mid-tier science fiction film in the mid-1980s. After scrapping Loncraine's footage and starting over with Petersen, the costs ballooned to over $40 million. That made it one of the most expensive films of 1985. That kind of spending meant Enemy Mine needed to be a massive hit just to break even. For a strange, slow-paced drama about two enemies stranded on a desert planet, that was never going to happen. The financial pressure turned what should have been a thoughtful character study into a doomed project. The studio had already written it off as a loss before it even opened in theaters. 3. The spit technique. The alien character Jereba speaks with this strange, gurgling, wet quality that sounds like his throat is filled with liquid. Most audiences assumed it was a post-production sound effect layered over Louis Gossett Jr.'s dialogue. It wasn't. Gossett created that sound himself by constantly pooling saliva in the back of his throat while he was acting. He manipulated his voice to create that guttural alien quality. He was essentially choking himself take after take to get the sound right. It was physically exhausting. The technique gave the Drac language an otherworldly texture that made Jereba feel genuinely alien, but it came at a brutal cost to Gossett's throat and vocal cords. It's one of the most committed vocal performances in science fiction history, and almost no one realizes it was done live on set. 4. The makeup torture Louis Gossett Jr. had to endure 4 hours in the makeup chair every single day of shooting just to become Jereba. The heavy prosthetics covered his entire face and head. Once they were applied, he couldn't eat solid food. He had to drink his lunch through a straw to avoid damaging the appliances. But the physical discomfort was only part of the nightmare. Because the makeup made him look so frightening and inhuman, Gossett made the decision to stay away from the rest of the cast and crew between takes. He remained in character to preserve the illusion. The only person he interacted with was Dennis Quaid. This self-imposed isolation made Gossett genuinely lonely on set, which fed directly into his performance as an alien stranded on a hostile planet, cut off from his own people. The loneliness wasn't acting. It was real. 5. The turtle design. When Wolfgang Petersen took over as director, one of the first things he did was scrap the original alien design. Richard Loncraine's version of the Drac looked like a reptilian gargoyle, all sharp edges and menace, designed to look like a monster from a horror movie. Peterson wanted something completely different. He demanded a design that looked noble, ancient, and wise, something that could convey dignity and intelligence without relying on human features. The final look was inspired by sea turtles. A hard, shell-like exterior, but soft, expressive eyes that could communicate emotion. It was a brilliant choice that made Jereba Shigan feel like a fully realized character, instead of a rubber-suited creature. It's one of the reasons the film still holds up visually decades later. 6. The male pregnancy panic. The studio was terrified of their own movie. The central plot twist of Enemy Mine, that the alien Jereba Shigan is asexual and spontaneously becomes pregnant, forcing Dennis Quaid's character to help deliver the baby, absolutely horrified the marketing department. They had no idea how to sell a movie where one of the main characters is a pregnant male alien giving birth in the middle of a survival story. In 1985, the concept of male pregnancy was so far outside mainstream Hollywood storytelling that it felt like box office poison. The studio tried to market Enemy Mine as a Star Wars-style action adventure. They filled the trailers with explosions and laser battles and completely hid the pregnancy subplot. This bait and switch backfired spectacularly. Teenagers showed up expecting space dogfights. They left confused by a slow, emotional parenting drama. It was a marketing disaster born from pure fear. 7. The love story debate. From the moment Enemy Mine was released, critics and fans have debated what the relationship between David and Jereba Shigan actually represents. On the surface, it's a story about two enemies from warring species learning to trust each other. Many viewers saw it as an allegory for race relations, especially given that Louis Gossett Jr., a black actor, was playing an alien who faces prejudice and dehumanization. Others interpreted it as a gay romance. Two men forming a deep emotional bond, living together, raising a child in isolation. The film never makes the romance explicit, but both Dennis Quaid and Louis Gossett Jr. played the emotional connection with total sincerity, treating it as a genuine love story that transcended the science fiction trappings. Whether you see it as friendship, romance, or something in between, the bond between these two characters is the emotional core of the film. The ambiguity isn't a flaw. It's the point. 8. The mine was a U-boat hangar. After the production moved from Iceland to Germany, Wolfgang Petersen built the alien planet sets inside the massive Bavaria studios in Munich. The main set, the hostile desert landscape where David and Jereba are stranded, was constructed inside the same enormous hangar that Petersen had used for the submarine interiors in Das Boot. This wasn't just a soundstage, it was a cavernous space large enough to hold a full-scale WWI U-boat. Petersen filled the hangar with tons of fake lava rock, sand, and debris to create the desolate alien wasteland. The sheer scale of the set gave the actors a real sense of isolation and danger. It was a monumental construction effort that most audiences never even noticed. But it's the reason the planet feels so physically real and oppressive throughout the film. 9. The ending was reshot again. Even after Wolfgang Petersen reshot the entire movie, the studio still wasn't satisfied with the ending. Petersen's original finale was quieter and more reflective, focusing on David's return to human civilization and his struggle to honor Jereba's memory by protecting his child Zamis. The studio demanded something more exciting, more commercial, more action-packed, so they forced Petersen to add an entirely new sequence at the end. David infiltrates an alien slave mine to rescue Zamis from brutal captivity. Explosions, shootouts, a heroic last-minute escape. This sequence was tacked on late in production to give audiences a generic action payoff. It clashes with the rest of the film's tone, but the studio believed it was necessary to salvage their $40 million investment. They were wrong. It didn't help. 10. The book Is Brutal Enemy Mine was based on a novella by Barry B. Longyear. The original story is significantly darker and more philosophical than the film. In the book, the war between humans and the Drac is depicted as far more vicious and morally complex. Both sides commit atrocities that challenge the reader's sympathies. The ending is completely different. Instead of a shootout in a mine, the novella focuses on the slow, painful integration of the two species and the political ramifications of David raising a Drac child. It's a thoughtful meditation on racism, xenophobia, and the cost of peace. The film had to soften many of those edges to make it palatable for mainstream audiences. The book is worth reading if you want to see what Enemy Mine could have been without studio interference. 11. The language is real. The alien language spoken by the Drac in Enemy Mine wasn't just random gibberish invented by the actors. The production hired a professional linguist to construct a fully functional language with consistent grammar, vocabulary, and phonetic rules. The linguist mixed Russian root words with reversed English sounds to create something that felt alien but still had internal logic. Louis Gossett, Jr. had to memorize not just his lines but the underlying structure of the language. He needed to deliver his dialogue with the correct cadence and emphasis. It's an incredible level of detail that most science fiction films don't bother with. It's one of the reasons the Drac feel like a real culture rather than a cheap rubber-suited alien race. 12. Dennis Quaid's crazy eyes. Dennis Quaid's character, Willis Davidge, spends much of the film on the edge of madness. Isolated on a hostile planet with no hope of rescue, only an alien enemy for company. To sell that psychological deterioration, Quaid reportedly deprived himself of sleep during the filming of the stranded sequences. He wanted to look genuinely unhinged. Bloodshot eyes, twitchy, paranoid energy that couldn't be faked with makeup or acting tricks. It was a dangerous method technique that pushed Quaid's physical and mental health to the limit. But it worked. His performance in the early scenes feels genuinely unstable, like a man who's one bad day away from total collapse. It's a level of commitment that's both impressive and slightly terrifying. 13. The baby, Zammies, became a voice acting legend. The young version of Zammies, Jariba's child who David raises after his friend's death, was played by a child actor named Bumper Robinson. Robinson was just a kid when he shot Enemy Mine, but he went on to have a long and successful career as a voice actor. He's the voice of Cyborg in Justice League, Doom, Falcon in Avengers Assemble, dozens of other animated characters across Marvel, DC, and video game franchises. It's a fascinating legacy. The alien child from one of the strangest science fiction films of the 1980s grew up to become one of the most prolific voice actors in the industry. Millions of people recognize his voice without ever knowing his face, or that he started as an alien baby in a box office bomb. 14. The Pepsi can became iconic. In a future where humanity has mastered interstellar travel, faster-than-light engines, and intergalactic warfare, Willis Davidge still drinks Pepsi. It's blatant, shameless product placement. Multiple shots of Davidge pulling out a futuristic Pepsi can with a weird flip-top lid that looks nothing like a modern soda can. The studio clearly made a deal with Pepsi to feature their product. They went all in on it. But here's the strange thing. The futuristic can design became a minor collector's item. Prop nerds and Enemy Mine fans tracked down replicas and production stills of the Pepsi can. They treat it as a legitimate piece of science fiction design history. It's one of the most absurd examples of product placement accidentally becoming iconic. 15. It nearly bankrupted. The studio Enemy Mine was a catastrophic financial failure. Against its bloated $40 million budget, the film made only around $12 million at the domestic box office. It was a disaster that contributed to 20th Century Fox's financial struggles in the mid-1980s, forcing the studio to reconsider how much money they were willing to pour into risky science fiction projects. But the film found a second life on VHS and cable television. People who rented it at Blockbuster or caught it late at night on HBO discovered a strange, emotionally resonant story that was unlike anything else in the genre. It's proof that box office numbers don't tell the whole story. Sometimes the best films are the ones that fail spectacularly and then quietly find their audience years later. Enemy Mine is one of the most fascinating disasters in science fiction history. A movie that was made twice, nearly bankrupted a studio, confused everyone who saw it in theaters, and terrified its own marketing department so badly they pretended it was a different film entirely. Somehow it became a cult classic anyway. Which behind-the-scenes secret shocked you the most? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of the strangest films of the 1980s, hit subscribe for more stories about the movies that failed spectacularly and lived forever. See you in the next one.